Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. That is the great mantra that resounds through South India. The rocks chant it, the sea chants it, the straggly, rugged trees chant it, and the devotees in the temples of Shiva in South India chant it. It impregnates the whole sacred atmosphere of this great sacred world that I'm inviting you into on a virtual pilgrimage. Nothing could be crazier in a way than taking a virtual pilgrimage of South India. But nothing, I believe, could be more inspiring to you at this moment of the world's global dark night, which could potentially be the birth canal of a new embodied divine humanity. All the visions that I've been given in my life of this astounding possibility that could be born out of the marriage of the transcendent and immanent Godhead, the masculine and the feminine, light and matter, light and dark, body and soul, this great marriage, all of the visions of this great marriage have been given to me in the place where I was born by a great grace, South India, born 68 years ago in Coimbatore to an actress mother and a policeman father. I have been back to South India every single year since then to drink deep of the golden waters of revelation that this sacred, astounding place will offer you if you accompany me on this journey to the four most powerful places that I could possibly initiate you into as well as I can. We're going to start on Shiva's dancing ground, that is the name for Tamil Nadu, because Tamil Nadu is dotted with temples that symbolize the different places where Shiva, the great god of creation and destruction, the universal dancer, began his tremendous dance. We're going to go first on Shiva's dancing ground to Mahabalipuram. No words of mine could ever express my gratitude for what was, when I first visited it, a funky, sleepy fisherman's village, but has now become an explosive, wild tourist town. Because what I discovered in Mahabalipuram at the age of 25 is something that has been maturing at different levels of my being ever since. What I discovered in the golden temples of Mahabalipuram, the golden sculptures of Mahabalipuram, carved out of the golden rock of Mahabalipuram, is nothing less, and I really want you to hear this, than the alchemical book of the deepest possible vision of what humanity can be when it realizes in heart, mind, soul, and body, and in the glory of the creation, the true meaning of the sacred marriage of the transcendent and the immanent, of the Father, Mother, God. And I'm going to begin there because for me, the sculptures and the temples of Mahabalipuram are each pages in this great alchemical book that's been written, if you like, by the sculptors that were hired by the enlightened Pallava kings in Mahabalipuram to give to their world and to our world now in its burning time a vision of a robust, healthy, glorious, unified world in which the male and the female are honored, in which the creation is celebrated as sacred, in which every animal is recognized as a holy messenger of the light, and in which the human and the divine naturally and harmoniously and playfully and with immense tenderness dance together. So when we go to Mahabalipuram virtually, I'll begin in front of the great rock of Arjuna's Penance, and I'll show you detail by detail how this great rock, which is probably the greatest sculpture in the world, many people have thought that, how this great rock is a revelation not only of that ancient wisdom, but a revelation that can inspire you and I now in this tragic, burning global dark night of ours to devote all of our sacred energies to building this world that we see so beautifully, so simply, so naturally, and so completely represented in front of us. And then we will go to the great sculpture of Krishna holding up the mountain. And again, you'll see that harmony, that sense of the gods protecting us, that sense of a world that is utterly sacred in all of its particulars. And I will show you, as you will have seen in Arjuna's Penance, how specially moving the depictions of animals are. And as you may know, animals and the search for a much juster and more harmonious way of dealing and loving animals has been at the center of my work, because I believe that unless we can reverse this Auschwitz of cruelty that we're pouring on animals, our doom is certain. A tsunami of black karma is coming towards us. But in these sculptures, you can see and be empowered by the vision that will give us the strength and the majesty and the tenderness of being to pour ourselves out, to reverse this madness and start bringing in the great holy golden world of the sacred marriage. And we'll end our pilgrimage with two things to Mahabalipuram. We'll end with the great Durga sculpture. Mahabalipuram was created in its magnificence after the writing of the Devi Mahatmyam, which came out of the great tantric movement of the 6th century. And in the Devi Mahatmyam, you have a vision of the goddess summing up in her own being all the powers of the gods and destroying the Asura, the hubristic, domineering, crazy buffalo Asura, who was threatening the world. And in the greatest sculpture of Mahabalipuram, even greater in some ways than the rock, you'll see and you'll experience this tremendous feminine power and its mercy and its tenderness and compassion, even to the being that it is destined to destroy, because its destruction of the Asura is, her destruction of the Asura is also the liberation of the Asura from all the horrible, ghastly prides and tendencies that are keeping that Asura imprisoned, as we are imprisoned in this system of cold evil that we've created out of our madness. And we'll end our visit by going to the most beautiful monument ever created of the sacred marriage, which is the Shore Temple. It's as delicate and as sublime as a Mozart adagio, and it's a very tender temple when you look at it and study it. But if you live as I've lived for many, many months in Mahabalipuram, you come to realize that it is actually a nuclear reactor from which a stupendous power of sacred marriage grace is radiating, not only throughout South India, but throughout the world. So that's how we're going to begin this pilgrimage, by baptizing ourselves in the golden waters of this stupendously grounded but exalted vision of the sacred marriage and of the divine harmonious humanity that it can create and can still create. Then I'm going to take you to Pondicherry. And it was in Pondicherry when I returned to India after 15 years. I spent the first 9 years of my life in India and then went through the concentration camp of reason in English education, and then returned broken and exhausted and despairing to India when I was 25, and went to Pondicherry, drawn there by a secret magnetism which I couldn't understand. And Pondicherry is a French town. It's French architecture of great beauty in South India, but it has a tremendous power, a diamond at its center, and that is the Ashram of Aurobindo. This is not the place to try or even begin to try and explain to you why Aurobindo is so important, not only to the whole tradition of Hinduism of India, but to our moment now. But what I will say is that for me, Aurobindo is the greatest of all evolutionary mystics, the Plato of evolution, and the stupendous vision of the birth of a new divine humanity through the torrential descending grace of the Divine Mother in her supramental light. That vision, which has exploded quietly and softly since his being taken up into the light in 1950, and continued to influence more and more and more Western and Eastern philosophers and seekers, that vision is what I'm going to introduce you to. So you can see how South India, this Shiva's dancing ground, it has been endlessly dynamic with its creation of ever richer, ever deeper visions of the potential evolutionary transfiguration force of the sacred marriage. And when we're in Pondicherry, I will also introduce you to the woman who was Sri Aurobindo's consort, the mother. Quite simply, the mother is one of the very greatest revolutionaries of mystical history. Because after Aurobindo left, she continued his work, and she took his work into the most ferocious and extraordinary yoga of the transfiguration of the body itself, of the cells of the body, which she recognized as the yoga that was necessary now to birth an embodied divine human race. Fundamentally, what the mother said is that the old yogas, the old ways of privileging the transcendent and diminishing the whole power of the creation and of the glory of the human form, they were all bankrupt because they'd all resulted in this murderous killing spree that we are now indulging in. And what she went on in her last years, in her 80s and 90s, was a journey into the depths of the cells themselves, to teach them through using the mantra Om Namo Bhagavate, to reverse their imbecilic obedience to the laws of death and devote that holy obedience to a divinization of the entire cellular structure and therefore of the body itself. And she went very far and very deep, as I will explain, before she too left her body. So in Pondicherry, you will be given a clear and radiant vision of the greatest evolutionary pioneers that we've ever had on the earth. After Pondicherry, if we can survive that experience, we'll go to a place which is unbelievably sacred to me, which I've been to in many different times of my life, at many different stages of my life. It's the center of the Shaivite world. It's the center of the adoration of Shiva the dancer. And it's a place called Chidambaram. And there in Chidambaram, in a tiny shrine which is covered with a roof of pure gold, the most sacred image of Shiva in the world, a golden image of Shiva the dancer, is worshipped daily by what are called the Dikshitars, who are a special group of priests that came, it's said in legend, from Mount Kailasha, and who used to wear, they still sometimes wear, one half of their hair like a woman and the other half of their hair like a man, to symbolize the great mystery of what's called Shiva Ardhanarishvara, the Shiva that fuses together Parvati, the divine feminine, and the divine masculine. And in Chidambaram, I will try and do three glorious things for you. First, I will introduce you a little to the 1,400-year-old history of a shrine that has attracted all of the great mystics and siddhas and sages of South India, including the very greatest of all of those mystics, Manikavashaka, who is said to have vanished into the golden light in front of the statue in the central shrine. That's the first thing I'll try and do. The second thing I will try and do is to convey to you what it's actually like to be with passionate, wild Shaivites in that shrine, drawing on the grace, the particular grace of that image, which is the grace of the uplifted foot of Shiva, that is a bliss-bestowing grace, a grace of protection. And I'll explain the holiness of that to you and try and convey to you what it's like to be in that atmosphere with sadhus and holy men and sages and wild old women singing the great songs of Shiva. And then I'll take you deeper, because at the core of Chidambaram, at the core of the celebration of the golden Shiva, there is a great secret. And that is that the golden Shiva that you are worshipping isn't only the most glorious and all-transfiguring form of the divine, the ultimate form of a bliss-bestowing, infinitely loving, infinitely creative, infinitely transforming divine. It's also, and this is the secret of secrets in all of the great mystical traditions, it's also an image of what you can become through total surrender and total adoration to the dancing Shiva. You too can be born as an embodied divine engoldened Shiva, an engoldened dancer of the transcendent and immanent. So you see how the sacred marriage radiates through all of these different facets and realizations. And I'm trying to bring them all to you so that you can experience the richness and depth and passion and transfiguring evolutionary power of what is being seeded in South India for so many centuries. And towards the end of that transmission, I'm going to go in my heart mind with you to a small room about 150 miles from Chidambaram, which was lived in by the greatest Christian mystic of the 20th century, who was my soul father, and the being who I have loved the most and learned from at the deepest level the most, Father Bede Griffiths, because the only image that he had in his room was that of Shiva Nataraja, which for him was an image of the full divine and embodied Christ consciousness. So for him, Shiva the dancer and Jesus as the Lord of the dance in the famous Shaker hymn were indistinguishable. And I'm going to show through my own recitation of the visions that he gave me and the maps that he gave me of what we are living, I'm going to show how he, in his last years, was experiencing this engoldenment process that has been the secret of South India as the transfiguration process that Jesus seeded in the resurrection, but that he also knew had been explored with tremendous genius by Aurobindo and had also been known by the ancient Shaivite mystics in the place that he spent 50 years. So everything in South India is interconnected in this great dance. Then for the last part of this virtual pilgrimage, I will take you to what all Shaivites consider to be the ultimate sacred place on the earth. And that is the mountain of Arunachala in Tiruvannam. And the reason why Shaivites worship and venerate this place, and for thousands of years have been coming to this place to meditate in the great caves on the mountain, and sometimes to vanish into other realms on the mountain. It's said that the mountain is inhabited by 50,000 disembodied Siddhas. I've never seen any of them, but you can feel their presence on that great mountain. The reason why Arunachala has been worshipped and revered is that for the South Indian mystical imagination and mind, it's not a mountain. It is actually the crystallization through the different yugas of a descending fire lingam of Shiva himself. And every year in January, they worship, hundreds of thousands, millions of people, in fact, sometimes come to the worship of the fire on the top of the mountain to symbolize that astounding grace. And when I first saw Arunachala from the back of a car which was being driven at breakneck speed, about 20 miles away from Arunachala, for a millisecond, I saw the fire lingam. So for me, it was a complete revelation, and I've gone back again and again and again to that holy place to be inspired at the deepest level. And I will share with you the visions of the future of humanity that were given to me there. But I will concentrate in this last part of our gorgeous journey in South India. I will concentrate on the man who, with Sri Aurobindo, was the greatest sage of India of the 20th century, a man whom you all will have heard of, Ramana Maharshi. I find it very hard always to speak of Ramana Maharshi because my reverence for him and my gratitude for the astounding initiations that over the years he has given me is endless and boundless. And also because I have a very personal relationship with him, because my father was head of police between the ages, I think, of 25 and 28 of the district in which Ramana lived. For 2 years, he saw Ramana every single day and was loved by Ramana. Ramana didn't speak much, but when my father came, apparently he would smile and hand him apples. And I've often felt that everything I've been able to do comes from the blessing that he gave my father, who was in his own marvelous, humble way, a very profound person, and Ramana saw it. But we're ending with Ramana because Ramana wasn't in his philosophy an evolutionary mystic. He was a mystic of the timeless self. But what I have discovered on my own journey is that without Ramana's blessing, without Ramana's grace, without the initiation into the strength and the majesty and the dignity of the timeless and deathless self, no further transfiguration process can be activated. So in my own journey as an evolutionary mystic, I have gone back again and again to Tiruvannam to be tuned and deepened and strengthened in the very fiber of my own realization of my own self, through Ramana, to be given the courage and the strength to take the evolutionary path that the sacred marriage and the sacred revelation of Aurobindo and of Bede have given me. So that's just a taste of the beauty and the power and the majesty and the glory and the challenge that South India has for all of us at this moment. We're in a terrible time, and it's very easy to despair. But what I have learned from South India is that there is a deep meaning to this time, and it's a meaning that will astound you when you begin to grasp it. And very simply, it can be said like this: we are dying and we are being reborn, but we're being reborn into the next level of our evolutionary destiny, which is nothing less than the level that Aurobindo understood and lived, and Bede understood and lived, and Ramana incarnated, and the great sculptures of Mahabalipuram celebrated. The next level of our evolutionary destiny is to be born as embodied divine human beings capable of co-creating a wholly new way of being and doing everything. All of the certainties and confidences that I have in this vision have been graced to me through my birth in South India and through the tremendous visions, both aesthetic and mystical and evolutionary, and through the tremendous beings who radiated this knowledge in South India. So at this moment, when everything seems threatened, I'm inviting you to come with me and drink the golden wine of visions that will give you the courage and the passion and the clarity and the steadiness and the stamina to devote your lives, come what may, to the birth of a new humanity. This isn't any ordinary pilgrimage, my friends. This is a pilgrimage into the furnace of the future, the golden furnace of the potentially golden, embodied, divine future. Thank you.